What have you made of Australia's efforts to repair what had become quite a strained relationship with regard to climate change in the Pacific nations?
Yeah, I think a lot of the people in the Pacific, leaders and also grassroots communities, are feeling a lot better about the relationship since both Prime Minister Albanese and the Foreign Minister Penny Wong have made so much effort to converse with people at all levels over the last few weeks, and that's been a really great sign. The climate pledge that has been delivered has been welcome, but I think it's also goes to what the Prime Minister of Fiji was saying today, that it is a great step in the right direction, but we need to see more. And I think that's what we're waiting for at the moment in the Pacific is, this is great, but what else is there?
Yeah, and that is so true because, you know, the capacity to really get rid of fossil fuel or get rid of our dependence on fossil fuel is not going to be an easy thing. It's not going to happen overnight. Do you think Australia and New Zealand need to give greater commitments? But it's not just our two nations, it's most of the nations in the world.
Yeah, so two of the key themes from the Pacific Island Forum were about being visionary and innovation when thinking about how we just tackle the climate crisis, but also how we can ensure the dignity of our people as we move forward. And the example that has been put through time and time again is that you need only look at the Pacific to see what vision and innovation can look like if we can continue to figure out how to rebuild our communities in the aftermath of a disaster. If the Marshall Islands and Kiribati can think of ways to lift their islands out of the water, to reclaim land, to think of these new really great ways to adapt, then countries across the world can also try and invest that same kind of transformative vision into the way they transform their energy systems and I guess rid themselves of their addiction to fossil fuels.
Yeah. The challenge, though, with the disruption to global supply chains and now the war in Ukraine has put this into sharp focus. Yet the ability to do it is not going to be as easy. You know, what sort of voice do the Pacific nations have when nations are grappling with very difficult and complex ways of sort of weaning themselves off these old forms of energy?
You only need to look at the Pacific to see that it's possible to shift your energy systems. Tokelau is the first country in the whole entire world to be run by 100% renewable energy. Each country in the Pacific has a clear pathway to transforming the energy system so that we do create our own energy. And amongst civil society and grassroots, the conversation is around democratizing power and ensuring our communities can access their own energy. And so it really just comes back to this whole idea about being visionary and innovative in the way that we do things. And we know that it's not easy, and we know it's going to take a lot of political will, but it's possible.
Joseph, at the same time, a lot of Pacific nations face great challenges. Many are racked with corruption, standards of living that are very lacking. You know, there did appear to be a much more united Pacific family on show today, but there's a lot of work to be done, isn't there?
There's a lot of work to be done in so many aspects of this to ensure, I guess, at the end of the day, that our people can continue to move through this world with the dignity that they have the right to. And that comes in so many ways around access to power, access to energy, and ensuring that those mechanisms can flow, even skip over our governments and go directly to the people that need them on the ground. And those are the conversations that we're having at our level as civil society to try and push that up into government. But I guess our job is also about holding governments accountable, because we know that we need to be there to do that.
Yeah. What did you make of sort of almost perhaps not enough attention to China's role in the Pacific? It certainly was discussed on the sidelines, but it wasn't a major issue on the agenda. China is a major emitter as well. Is it hard to acknowledge China's position at this point?
China's influence isn't something that's just come in overnight. For anybody who's grown up in the Pacific, you've known that it's always been there. As a Tongan, there is a really big Chinese population in Tonga. The Chinese people speak Tongan very well. All of our roadside shops are run by Chinese people. And so it's something that we've seen happen over time. And I guess in terms of where Pacific people go for the support for finances around infrastructure and adaptation, I can't be blamed for seeking that in many different spaces. But it's such an interesting thing to be watching at the moment, and especially play out amongst not just China, but also America stepping in now with these new embassies and trying to reestablish their influence in the region. And so it's geopolitically, it's an interesting thing to follow in the Pacific at the
And
moment.
that's a good point, Joseph, because, you know, for so long it's been hard for the Pacific nations to get attention. Now suddenly they're almost the centre of the universe because of this power struggle. But to your point, it needs to be equitable. Access to so much of the stuff needs to be equitable. And often governments and business stands in the way of that, does it not?
That's correct. And at the end of the day, I guess if countries like Aotearoa and Australia and the USA really did care about the Pacific, then they would have been in the Pacific for a lot longer than they had and not have to come and reestablish themselves in there as they are doing now. But also, if we look at our region, mobility for our people is so difficult just to get from the Pacific into Australia. It's easy enough for our people to come to Australia and pick through, but if we want to come in here and find pathways to live and to build livelihoods, that's difficult. And we need to really think about how our people can move within this region and how we can look after each other if these countries really do care about us.
We will wait and see. A very interesting start, though. Good to talk, Joseph. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.